Hey guys, how's it going? It's Liam here from Xclusiv Fitness, and I haven't done a video for a very long time, so I thought I would just do a few. Starting today with 3 big myths about fat loss. These are kind of things that I've pretty much said all the time anyway, and if you work with me, these are things that you'll hear me say time and time again. But every single day, I still get the same messages, I still get the same emails, and I still get the same questions around these 3 particular things that I'm going to talk about today. Before I do that though, I'm just going to tell you why I haven't done a video for a very long time. I like doing videos, but I've been working on my own supplement company called Natural Nutrients. If you want to check us out, go to naturalnutrients.co.uk or /Natural Nutrients on Facebook to see what we're all about. But essentially, 17 products, 100% natural, no added sugars, no chemicals, no hormones, no pesticides, no herbicides, no cherry bakewell protein powders, any of that rubbish that doesn't really work. Just, you know, natural products to help you lose weight, get healthier and live a better lifestyle. But anyway, this isn't a shameless plug about natural nutrients, this is about fat loss. So, 3 myths, start with number 1, age-old problem for most people. Is cardio good for fat loss? The answer, unfortunately, is no, okay? Not because cardio doesn't burn fat when you're doing it, okay? Because it does. And in fact, cardio actually burns more fat as fuel than any other type of exercise. But the issue with cardio and why it's ineffective for fat loss, from my point of view, and scientifically, is simply because once you finish, your fat loss almost stops, okay? Now, why does this make this inefficient, or why does it not make it a very effective form of exercise for weight loss? Well, think about it this way. If you exercise, okay, and you're doing cardio for 1 hour, okay, and you're doing that 5 times a week, but you only create much of a disruption, or you only sort of disturbing your metabolic rate enough to burn for another hour or so after you finish working out, then that means you're going to have to work out more to burn more. Agree? Okay? If then, for example, you do something that is like metabolic resistance training or resistance training or interval training or something that's a lot more intense and that causes a bigger disruption to the metabolic rate, then if you do that for 30 minutes, but for the next 36 to 48 hours you're going to be burning fat, does that make that much more effective than cardio? Yes, of course, because essentially you're doing 30 minutes, so you're doing half the time that you would do as your normal cardio session, but you're burning for, what, I don't know, 20, 30 times longer than you would be when you're doing cardio. And this is why it makes it inefficient. But aside from how long you actually burn fat for once you finish cardio, making it inefficient, the second thing is obviously how good you become at doing cardio. Now, I know this seems a bit back to front to think if you get better at something you burn less, but that's exactly what happens. If, for example, you run a mile today, but then in 3 weeks you can run 3 miles, then you condition your body to go longer and further on less fuel, okay? So your body then gets better at using less and burning less calories, burning less energy, using less energy than it did today, okay, in 3 weeks' time. And just to recap why that makes it less efficient, if you're, just like in a car, if you're using less fuel to go further, then you're not burning as much. Okay, so essentially, not only does you be getting better at aerobic endurance or cardio or whatever you're doing, not only does that make you burn less fuel as energy and subsequently burn less fat for going longer and doing more, the after effect of actually doing cardio is way less than other types of training, such as metabolic training, resistance training, interval training, Tabatas, or whatever it may be. Okay, so cardio for fat loss, the best way to think about it is, if you want to do cardio for fat loss, expect it to take a very long time, or expect you to do an awful lot. And you know, it's out of the scope of this video why doing a lot of cardio is no good for stress levels, but we'll not talk about that today. Okay? So basically the top and bottom is, it's been time tried and tested by myself with over 300 clients personally over the last couple of years, but also all the coaches at Xclusiv Fitness, that cardio sucks for fat loss. Now, I think I might have just made the point, so we're going to move on to the next one, which is the fact that people think they need carbohydrates in the diet. Now, you do need carbohydrates in your diet, but not those white starchy fat storing ones that you find in breads, pastas, flour products, cakes, you know, whatever it may be, that is using a white carbohydrate. Okay, potatoes is another one. You don't actually need those, especially when you're trying to cut fat. Now, the problem with carbohydrates is simply this: if you eat more carbohydrates or more sugar than you need, or use, or store, then you'll store it as fat. Okay, so I'll just say that again. If you consume more carbohydrates than you eat, use, or store for later, then pretty much all of the rest will be stored as fat. Sometimes it's fat in your fat cells, sometimes it's cholesterol in your arteries, or whatever it may be. But what you need to understand is that you don't need carbohydrates in the terms of the white starchy ones to actually have energy. Okay? If you're trying to cut fat, you should take out carbohydrates for at least 2, 3 or even 4 weeks, depending on how lean you are. Okay? And how lean you are basically means what your muscle to fat ratio is. The more fat you have, the less carbohydrates you should have. Okay? And the more muscle you have, the more carbohydrates you can have. Okay? Because often if you have more muscle, your metabolic rate's naturally higher, you burn fat more, and you're more likely to use the carbohydrates that are coming in. Okay? Because there's basically nothing stopping them getting into the cells, which is what happens when you have a lot of fat there. And don't forget, your body can use fat as a fuel source as well, so it's not in any great rush to say, oh shit, you know, like I've run out of potatoes today, I'm going to die tomorrow, I'm not going to have any energy. Okay? It doesn't work like that. So if you think, right, for the next 4 weeks I'm not going to have any white carbohydrates whatsoever, then that's not the end of the world. Okay? You'll still have energy, especially after the first week or two, and you'll still be able to do your workouts, you'll still get up and go just like you normally would, okay, especially after the first week or so. You're not going to die, or you're not going to keel over, essentially, which is basically what people think. And like I said, where do you get your carbohydrates from is probably what you're thinking. Now, the only place that you need to get carbohydrates from for at least the first 4 weeks of a fat loss conditioning program would be from veg. Okay, all veg contain carbohydrates, something called fibrous carbohydrates, which is just basically fibre containing carbohydrates. So if you just add plenty of veg, plenty of meat, even some carbohydrates, small amounts from things like nuts, then that's absolutely fine. But again, if you start eating a lot of carbohydrates that you don't need, or that you've already stored as fat before, okay, whatever you don't store, use, or need, you're going to store as fat. And essentially, the more you eat, the more you'll store your fat. And again, this all comes down to how lean you are. Again, this is outside of the scope of this video, but the leaner you are, the more carbohydrates and the more tolerant you are to them, and the more you can have, essentially. Okay, but literally, for 4 weeks, you could take out carbohydrates, the white version, out of your diet, no problem whatsoever, and nothing would happen. Other than, you might have headaches or kind of an energy slump in the first week. The reason I'm talking about this is simply because what happens is, if you're having a lot of white carbohydrates all the time, you'll be elevating insulin levels, which is a storage hormone which basically stores and transports carbohydrates around the body. Now, if you're having imbalances, you're going to have energy fluctuations. Okay, so if you just pull the plug on your stimulations from the sugar, from the carbohydrate, then your energy is going to crash. Then it's going to peak, then it's going to crash, and it's not going to know what it's basically doing. But what most people do, and why they feel like they don't have any energy, is because they don't replace the calories that they've took out of the diet with carbohydrates with something like proteins or good fats. So for example, if you were eating lots and lots and lots of white carbohydrates every single day and you're worried about taking them out, simply take them out, replace them with protein. And you know that the more protein that you eat, or the more protein you consume, the more lean muscle tissue that you'll develop, and the more lean muscle tissue that you develop, the better and more efficient your metabolic rate will take over, because that's the only tissue in the body that can actually burn fat. So carbohydrates, do you need them for fat loss? No, absolutely not. Only if you're strength training, only if you're really hammering the gym would you ever need carbohydrates. Take them out if you want to lose fat. If you don't, if you want to hang on to your fat, keep them in. Okay, third one, final one. It's my hat that's itching us, but it's too cold outside, hence wearing me not so stylish insulet hat here, even in the house in spring. But anyway, the third and final myth is sleep, and it's one of the most underestimated things. Okay, like, to be honest, I'm probably the biggest hypocrite of this, because You know, I love my work so much that I'll just work late into the night sometimes, and I know I shouldn't, and I'm always telling people to sleep more. But not getting enough sleep is like a recipe for saying to your body, please store fat. Okay, it's all to do with a hormone called cortisol, which regulates sleep cycle, which is also a stress and abdominal fat storing hormone. Now the problem with cortisol is that it's affected by stimulation, by not sleeping, and by stress. The interesting thing is though, most people who have stimulation, synthetic stimulation from things like sugar or either from caffeine, okay, during the day, will actually affect their sleep at night, and then that will affect their stress the next day. Okay, so it's like a vicious circle between the three. You can't just have no sleep, no stress, and a little bit of stimulation. They often come together. So my advice with regards to this one is simply create a consistent sleep cycle for 5 days of the week. Even if it's just Monday to Friday, that's so much better, okay, than having Monday 12 o'clock at night, Tuesday 8 o'clock at night, or whatever you want to go to bed and go to sleep. Okay, but again, it's so underestimated that people just don't pay much attention to sleep. And I know I sound like your mum or your nana or your granddad or your dad or whatever saying get your sleep, but it's so important for physiological, psychological, and just general repair. And if you don't get that time of sleep, your body won't repair. And if it won't repair, it'll wake up the next morning under-repaired. If it's under-repaired, it'll be stressed. And then if you're stressed, you'll have an energy spike, energy slump, and then you'll want some stimulation. Then you'll have your caffeine, then you'll be disrupting your sleep that night, and then you'll be stressed again. Okay, and you can see how this vicious circle just goes on. So literally, the best time to sleep, apparently, according to research, studies, science, and basically how we're designed genetically to sleep, would roughly be around about 10 at night till 6 in the morning. If you did that for 5 days during the week, I promise that would change your life. And also, if you changed nothing else in your diet, but you slept for 5 days, you would lose fat, just because of the amount of stress that you reduce on the body. Okay, give it a go. There's 3 massive things, 3 big myths that I always say. Much longer video than I thought it was going to be, but I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions or comments, pop them below and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thanks for watching, folks, and next time we'll talk more about training. Bye bye.